let's talk diversification of the economy. Now, that is a term in Trinidad that is very often used and very rarely actually used. Because Trinidad and Tobago has the benefit, if you want to call it a benefit, of being an oil and gas based economy. We have that black gold down here. And that black gold allows us some privileges. It means we don't have to worry too much about where the money comes from. Or we didn't have to worry too much about where the money comes from. If you have oil, you sell the oil, there's always a demand for oil, and you make money. And it has made us a lot of money. It has made many Trinidadians rich, and particularly many people linked to the government or the leading politicians. Many of them, it's made a lot of them very rich. But many people in Trinidad and Tobago, many intelligent people, and even people who are not that intelligent, people who just pay attention a little bit, you don't need to be that smart to figure out some things, All you need to do is be paying attention. And many people who are paying attention have been seeing for many years, I believe since before I was born, and that's at least 3 decades. So many people have been saying for many years that we have to diversify our economy. We cannot just depend on oil because one, oil is a non-renewable resource, meaning that it can finish. Potentially it will run out. Now, I wonder about, now, bear in mind, I studied biology, I studied the sciences, I understand the science behind it. But it feels like we've been hearing oil is going to run out for many years, and very regularly you hear people keep finding oil. Sometimes I wonder, but oil can run out. It potentially is supposed to run out at some point in time, and we have to plan for that. But even besides oil running out, I think before that or beside that is just innovation as things change. Oil and gas is an inefficient use of energy, and many people know this already. It's already being worked out of use. Well, attempted to being worked out of use. So many people, when they are designing new products and new vehicles, they're attempting to design with less oil in mind. So maybe as progress leads and innovation leads, oil and gas may be left obsolete at some point in time. And if we are totally dependent on that, and it no longer is viable to be sold on the international market, then we are left in trouble. So many people for years have been speaking about diversifying our economy. We need to find other ways as a country to make some money. And our Prime Minister recently divulged the reason he thinks, one of the main reasons we haven't been able to have that diversification. The reason he gave is that the population for many years have not gone along with the big projects of the government. And those big projects that the government had planned, if they were really done, that would have diversified the economy. Some may agree with him, but I am not in full agreement. As I progress in age more and more, I see, at least to me, it seems like the better way to get things done is the less centralized way. You centralize authority as little as possible. And many of these big projects that many of the governments have planned, and that's their way to diversify the economy, I think it's a cop-out. It's a lack of foresight, a lack of thinking in actually finding ways to allow the people in the country to innovate for themselves and figure out ways to diversify our economy. You don't need to create an industry for artificially forcing people to work there. If you create the circumstances that allow people to innovate on their own and allow their own innovations to blossom, we will diversify on our own. But the tendency of this Prime Minister and the PNM government in general, I think, to lean towards the large government projects is what I think is one of the faults of the PNM party in general. This is just my opinion. My opinion, I say it quite regularly, is that the PNM party, many people who accuse the PNM party in Trinidad of working along racial lines, and they say the PNM party is the racist party for the black people, I think they are mistaken. My personal opinion, when you look in the West, there aren't many racial parties that heavily are racist towards the black, and many of the times when they are, it's kind of very, very obvious. The PNM, I don't think they're racist. I think they work more along class lines. And this is what I mean. I think the PNM, many of the people in the PNM hierarchy have a general mindset that they can solve the problems better than the general population can. So we'd hear the finance minister in the PNM, many people already noticed that he has a penchant to increase taxes. He likes those taxes because in their view, they may view it as you tax the population and we, the government, would better use these resources to run this country and steer this country along a correct path. I could understand the reasoning, but I don't agree with it. And I think history has already proven that when you leave the authorities to centrally plan these things and to centrally plan the economies, etc., it oftentimes leads to disaster. Look in Afghanistan. I think part of the failure of Afghanistan as the US had to do with that attempt to use forceful artificial central planning. Anyway, let's read the article and see exactly what the Prime Minister said and how he said it. If you haven't clicked that like button yet, please do click that like button and drop a comment. I believe I've heard some people say that the comments are the strongest factors in the algorithm. So when you leave a comment, that's the thing that pushes the video the most. Well, I didn't study the YouTube algorithm that closely. I am not sure, but maybe. So drop that comment if you aren't subscribed yet. Please do click that subscribe button. And let's see. PM blames foolish people. Rowley knocks loss of big projects in TNT, resistant to diversification. Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley says economic diversification has been stalled by the behavior and foolishness of people in the country. He was speaking during the sud-turning ceremony for the new Desperados Pan Theatre in Port of Spain yesterday. You know, I find sud-turning to be a kind of strange thing. Like, what's the point? They go there and stick that one shovel and turn it. And they do it on the softest, most prepared bit of sand on the site. I think it was something of old with the pomp and royalty and the pomp and circumstance of royalty and the monarchies, etc. of old. And some of these things don't register as powerful of traditions as they once did. At least to me. When I see an official doing that, I am not sure what it's supposed to tell me or do for me, but it's a tradition. The Prime Minister noted that economic diversification has been the call of many for some time now, but he said government's efforts to do that have been met with resistance, leading to the failure of several big projects. He cited the Sandals Resorts project, initially proposed to be built in Tobago. The project was eventually scrapped as the company said it would no longer pursue the construction of a resort in Tobago due to constant and ongoing negative publicity and media coverage. Rowley lamented the loss of the project yesterday, saying Tobago was a prime destination for the Sandals Resort. Tobago said no. Trinidadians encouraged Tobagonians to say no. Right now, there are 2 additional ones being built in Jamaica, 2 more in Barbados, 1 in St. Lucia. Grenada is booming with 1, he said. We were ahead of all of those, but somebody in this country told you that this government was going to sell your birthright down the drain in Sandals. And of course, the project went up in Old Talk. And after carrying on the Old Talk and causing the abandonment of that, they have the unmitigated gall to say the Prime Minister didn't sell it properly. Listen, I haven't read through much on the Sandals project. I do not know how viable of a thing it was, but I could understand it from either way. The input of foreign investment is unmatched, really and truly. What a foreign multinational company could land in on an island and do, and just as it were, with the wave of a hand, the amount of resources immediately drops into the circulation in that island, well, that's amazing. But the drawback to that is on the tail end of it, when they start to draw back resources, when they start to take back the resources. Remember, if they're a multinational corporation, they're here for a profit. And a lot of that profit is going to be leaving the island. So this is an idealistic talk. So I understand, obviously, this isn't as easy and simple as just doing it. But in the idealistic mind, wouldn't it be better if we could furnish our own economy and allow the situation to be as such that local people would have their own innovative ideas on how to solve for increasing the capacity for visitors, making their own hotels or their own farms, and maybe in that unique style we may have something much more indigenous to sell on the market instead of the sandals resorts that are just about everywhere in the world. I don't know. Maybe it's just idealistic, but that's how I think sometimes when I think of less big government leaning projects and more decentralized, localized leaning. That's just me. Rowley also cited the Labre Industrial Development Company Limited, Labidco, which he said was supposed to replicate the success of the Point Lisas industrial estate, but was abandoned for years. That was abandoned a long time ago. That was problems, I believe, since the early 90s. Another big project. And obviously that wasn't the only one. When you look around Trinidad, you'd see many large projects where you could tell millions of dollars was invested there and it's just sitting there. I watch those things sometimes and I'm thinking, I have a little knowledge of construction and I'm watching the cost of these things. I could tell the cost of some of these things and I'm thinking that one wall that is sitting there with vines just growing all over it now, the cost of that wall may have built 3 homes. And I as I said before about speaking idealistic, I try to always be cautious of talking in that idealistic utopian way as if there was some direct path to not spend the money on that wall that the government built and spend it on 3 houses for people. And usually there isn't that direct a path. But when we're talking government resources, if the government is spending resources that they collect from the people, any resource that the government spends badly is a resource lost from the people. Is it not? At least that's the way I see it. He then went on to speak about the smelter and how that was another failed project, another one of these big projects that the government had planned to help us diversify the economy, but because of opposition, it was stopped. And he spoke about how many different places have these aluminum smelters working and they aren't dying or being poisoned there. I'm sure that would be a debatable question. And I am sure there would be some people very willing to pick him up and debate those questions with him. But that's not me. I'm not debating that directly on the health of the smelter. My question is, why, when he is speaking about diversification, it seems like he could only see it in the big project side? Why isn't it that we could understand as a country a more core representation of what a government is supposed to be? You're supposed to be creating the situation for people to flourish. You do not have to make people flourish. You do not necessarily have to make the jobs for people. I don't have that view of the government. I don't think it's the government's job to make work for the people. It's the government's job to make the situation set up in such a way that I can do work for myself, or I can sell my labor to someone who would like to purchase it, and I'm free to do just that. I was listening to an interview from the CEO of the TTMA, that's the Trinidad and Tobago Manufacturers Association, and he was lamenting about the same thing on diversification, but they were talking about it from the angle of the food prices. And this is how so many of the different things we see happening in a country are actually linked. The diversification of our economy is directly linked to controlling food prices within our economy also. Because if we have a more stable base in an agricultural direction in our economy, it will allow us to buffer prices even as they fluctuate on the outside market. The CEO of the TTMA was talking about many of the manufacturers in Trinidad and Tobago. We have a lot of manufacturers here. We create many products. We take raw materials and get value added products from it. And a lot of our products are high quality. A lot of our products sell in international markets. He was speaking about this too. It's nearly a boast if you look how many local Trinidadian products from this little dot of an island in the Caribbean Sea, many of our products go to international markets. But one of the problems we have is that almost all of the raw materials for these products, food materials, must be imported from outside markets, outside of the Caribbean. And I remember in my school days, we went through learning a certain thing called the CSME. We spent quite a bit of time learning about this and what it's going to do and the benefits of it, the possible disadvantages. I am sure I gained some marks in some subjects talking about this. And this is directly what the TTMA was talking about also. Shouldn't it be that you create the situation where if I want to import food products, I can import it from Guyana, where Guyana has open land in space. That's part of their natural resources. They have lots of open land. So when it comes to that extensive style of farming and agriculture that may be needed to create food products at the price that manufacturers would need to purchase it at, then areas with that kind of landmass may be needed. Trinidad may not have that landmass. Not saying that we cannot increase our agricultural output already, but we may not have that level of landmass. If the CSME was up and functioning as it should, we would be able to import that food, those raw materials from Guyana or Suriname or Belize or some one of these other CARICOM affiliate countries. But as it stands, it cannot be done because there are protocols that need to be met. He was speaking about this there, and these are things that sometimes we may not even know looking on from the outside, and you're wondering why this runs this way and why that runs that way and why don't they just do this. Well, if you're exporting to international markets, there are international standards to be met. There are standards for the food health safety levels that are required in all your inputs to create this manufactured product. And the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Agriculture, different sectors within those ministries are in charge and responsible for getting these protocols done and for getting these permissions cleared. And if we are seeing a hold up in that, it may very well be the ministries, these politicians, while they may be looking at some other direction to build some massive $2 billion project that's going to employ 300 people or 3,000 people for X amount of years and funnel most of the money outside of the country or funnel it into some one of the politicians' pocket, versus just furnishing the population with the access to be innovators for themselves. And I think way more solutions would be had that way. That's all I have for now. I hope you enjoyed the video, you were entertained, or at least you were informed, and do tune in tomorrow for the next.
And you feel the music, rising with the time.